All right, it's February 1st and we've got a beautiful day behind us. So today we are going to do some apple tree pruning. Now, a lot of you have seen my other videos. I'll put links down in the description below, but I've gotten several questions about what exactly I do out there. So once again, let's go out into the orchard. Let's take a look at these apple trees and the pear trees, and I'll show you exactly where, why, and how I do my pruning in the winter. So of course it's winter time right now and everything looks a little messy because there's just not as much greenery, but here's all the apple trees, and we've got, as you've seen before, 1, 2, 3 apple and then 3 pear going down that way. So you can see that a lot of growth happened last year. We've got a ton of suckers on there. There were a lot of apples. Last fall, we got a ton of apples, the most apples we've ever gotten on these trees. Most of them resided in the upper branches here. There were a few in the bottom branches, but not as many. And I'm going to get to that here in a few minutes, but I am considering cutting those lower branches off. Let me know in the description if you think I'm nuts, but I know it's taken a long time to get to this point. I just don't know if they're really adding, and they might be taking away from the overall production on these trees. So let's look at this one right now. I mean, the top of that thing is probably close to 8 foot up there, maybe 9 foot. So you definitely want to cut these things down to size right here. I want to keep them at a manageable level. And you can see my scaffolding in here. I've got some bigger, thicker branches coming up from here, and then we've got more stuff coming off of it all over the place. What we're pruning for in the winter time is form. So my rule of thumb that I've always given you guys is you prune in the summer for function. You prune those suckers. Like if I were to come back, which I didn't, if I were to come back last summer and cut back, usually you want to count 2 or 3 buds after the new growth. So there's a bud and there's a bud, and then you'd snip it right here, and it would encourage little fruit spurs to grow out of there. They won't always, but we will encourage that growth in the summertime. And that's pruning for function, for getting the actual fruit spurs on there. Because these little apples and the pears, they grow off of fruit spurs, not the long sucker branches that we've got here. Now I have plenty of fruit spurs on here that I've pruned for over the years, so I actually didn't do my summertime pruning. And you can actually, I'll show you real quick. Here's a fruit spur. We've got fruit spurs all over these things. They're little short branches that take off, and there's like 5, 6, 7, 8 little tiny buds in that little space. Let's see if I can get a better zoomed in view. There it is, kind of. Anyway, that's a fruit spur. There's lots of fruit spurs. There's fruit spur there. There's a fruit spur back in there. Some of them are smaller, some of them are bigger, but those will stay on there regardless unless I prune them off, and new fruit will come out of them every year. Here's a little fruit spur. That's one little short growth with lots of little buds, sites on it. And then we've got a fruit spur in there. This is where apples come from, fruit comes from. And so we want to get rid of all that sucker growth. Now, that's where wintertime pruning comes in. This is for function, or for form. So we're pruning in the winter for form. We're pruning in the summer for function. So we're not worried about fruit spurs right now. Everything's dormant. Nothing's going to happen right now. We just want to prune for form. We want to cut this thing back now that we can see the branching and it's dormant. We want to cut it back to the actual form we want it to look like. So I would come along here, and as I look at this, let's stand back. I've got my main scaffolding, and then my goal was always to have, there's a branch coming up there, a branch on the other side there, a branch there, big thick branches coming up, and then having little fruit spurs coming off them all the way along them, and do that along all the branches. So as I'm pruning for form and thinking about that right now in the winter, I'm going to be taking all this sucker growth off, and then I'll come back and prune out more of the other junk in between there. And I'm always thinking about when there's actually leaves and fruit on this tree in the summertime, can I get plenty of light and airflow through there? Because you don't want these big branches here in between, being too close together and just, crowding things out. And so that, that'll add to pests and problems, rot and fungus and things like that. So anyway, let's get this thing going and start pruning. I think we got it. Okay, so you can see I've trimmed out quite a bit. I've got my main form down that I want, and you know, I've got these guys going up here along the branch where I should be able to get fruit spurs along there. I did cut out a lot of fruit spurs while I was doing this, but that's okay. I need to kind of reshape this thing and thin it out a little bit. Now you can see some of these look closer together, but if you look at it from this angle here, you'll see that they're going off in different directions. And so it works out good that way. Plenty of airflow on either side so that you don't have to worry about them crowding each other out too much. I may take more out in the future, but you know, it's more of an art than a science. You just, every year you look at it, you see where things are growing together and where they're looking crowded, and you just prune some things out. Like right now I'm looking, I could probably just take that one out completely, and I might do that. Sometimes I'll come out here the next day and I'll look at it and go, now why did I leave that branch in place? And so it's just kind of something you play with over time. You can see the stark difference here between this tree I haven't pruned yet and this new one. Now, this summer, you know, we'll keep these watered, they'll grow again, and all this branching will thicken up that much more, and the scaffolding will continue to build so that next winter, you can already see here how the main scaffolding's there. But next winter, this branching will be even thicker than the water sprouts up top. And so it'll stand out that much more. Anyway, as we do these more and more over the years, they just start, you know, really building and getting stronger, and they're producing more fruit and better fruit. And I'm learning as I go as well. But I'm gonna keep moving down through all this and just keep pruning everything up, and you can take a look at that and see how it goes. All right, so I finished up these pears. I've got one left. This is the moon glow way on the end. It's the smallest of them all, so it'll go pretty quick. But you can see what's starting to take shape and develop here. And what I've done now, you know, I probably could have done better if I had pruned in the summer. You know, a little bit of early pruning goes a long way, because I've had to do a lot of heavy pruning today. But what you can see is I'm starting to develop this scaffolding a little bit better. I've taken a lot of inner branching out, like this kind of stuff right here, and this kind of stuff. You can see little stuff, and some of this that's just growing into itself. You just want to prune all that junk out of there. And then I've tried to kind of space the branching a little better. Let's see if I can find a spot like on these. This is one of the pear here. This is the Bartlett. I've taken off like a branch right there. I took that one off. So I've, you know, some of these had fruit spurs, but I'm really trying to develop my scaffolding. And like I said, it's an art. So every year you get a whole new fresh start. If you do something that you don't like one year, it's all going to grow back, and you're going to be able to continue pruning and continue training as you go. Now, I wanted to show you, where is it? Over here. Things like this. There was a nice big thick couple of them branches here. I cut it out because it was just too close to this one, and I wanted something a little more leveled out between this and this. So I cut that one out, and I let this little guy start growing. You know, over the next couple of years, this one will grow up and start forming into a nice stout branch. So like I said, I'm just kind of building my form. I left both of these because I'm not sure which way I want to go. I think I'm going to cut this one out because it's spaced better to leave this one in, but I want to see which one's stronger next year. You know, and just actually, you know what? That solves that question. So as I'm sitting here looking at it, I like this one going off. It's just spaced a little bit better. But, you know, you can see it's just, there's nothing exact about any of this. I took a lot of material out of the tops of them this time. A whole lot of material. I left a few of these in. That's a fruit spur because I do want to see some fruit next year. Fruit spur, fruit spur. All these little short stocky nubs here with lots of little internodal spacing, or not spacing, but lots of little nodes, short internodal spacing. Fruit spur, fruit spur. You know, I left a lot of those, even though they're down further on the branch, but that's what we're looking for. Some of them I cut out. On the pears, this is my Bartlett pear. You see on the apples over here, I kind of left one stalk, maybe two branching off of each individual stalk, like this one in here. But for the most part, I try to leave one stalk coming up. On the pears, I'm leaving a little bit more because they're kind of developing the way I want already. And I want to get fruit off of them next year. The apple, I did a heavier prune. So you're going to notice that, you know, there's not going to be as many flowers. There's not going to be as much fruit this year, but that's okay. I may even come back and cut some of this some more because I'm seeing areas in here that are just, you know, like that was two fruit spurs. So I decided to leave that in there for now, and maybe I will. But some of this stuff I might even be able to take that whole branch out. It's just growing into the middle. Things like that. It just kind of, whatever you want to see. Overall, though, I'm not too worried about, you know, branching that's crowding out the sun, because the sun rises over here in the east. Obviously, it rises in the east everywhere. And it just goes straight up over this way and then sets on the other side, which is the west. And so both sides of these trees, this whole row, gets an equal amount of sun all day long. There's nothing to block their view, and there's no trees to block them at all. So they get lots of sun on either side, every day. The other thing that I tried to do, I came down and before I had a lot of under branching here. You can see I pruned a lot of stuff out of there. I had a lot of branching that was coming down from underneath that one right there. I need to cut that a little closer, but and it was coming back up, and I was kind of training it so that I could have fruit down there. But what I noticed last fall, was I had a ton of fruit. I had a whole ton of fruit, but it was too much for these trees. I thought I was going to be able to pump enough water to them and they would be able to grow a ton of fruit, but I really should have thinned it out. And so I'm starting early. I'm thinning all these branches out. I want all the branches to be coming up off the top of them, nothing coming down underneath. And I think it gives it a really nice look. I'll come back and tighten this wire, try to kind of push this branch up a little higher, get these guys up. So there's a lot of weight hanging down on there in the summer, but it's starting to develop. There's only one more question that I would ask you guys, what you think I ought to do. And if you have an opinion one way or the other, please put your comments down below and let me know, because I am really curious. I have thought about pruning all these low branches right here, all these low branches, and only leaving the tops all the way along there, because it's still going to give that cool, awesome espaliered effect. But those lower branches they're robbing what could be happening up above, and they're not really producing. I haven't seen hardly any fruit of all the years we've been doing this. I haven't seen hardly any fruit on the bottom branches. Most of it, 90% of it's coming on the top. And I wonder if these little guys aren't robbing. The other thing I'm thinking is coming along this used to be a fence line for our cattle before I made it espaliered fruit trees. The other thing I'm thinking, though, is if I cut those lower branches, running some wire about 3 foot up all along this whole thing again, just something real quick, and then bringing the chickens over so that they could get into that area over there. Anyway, just something to think about. So there you go. So there it is. We got another pruning job done. Of course, I'm going to have to go out and finish that last pear tree, and I've got to go along still and prune all of the rootstock suckers, because those rootstocks send suckers up every year. It's just it's an annual chore that has to be done along with the pruning. It's not that big of a deal. I'll blow through it in about 5 minutes. And then we'll come back, and as the grass starts growing, I'll be mulching over top of all that like I do every year, and just keep everything watered and growing well. Now, we're not going to see as many flowers like we did last year on those apples because I did some hard, heavy pruning. But we are going to see more on the pear because I left some more of those fruit spurs. I'm not too worried about it. I've got another large apple tree somewhere else where we get a lot of our apples, and this is Washington State, so a lot of people are growing apples everywhere. My mother-in-law has apples. There's always plenty of apples to spare when it comes to the fall if you want to use them for canning or anything else. My wife made like, I think it was like over 20 jars of apple pie filling with the apples around here last year. So we're stocked up on that through the next 3 or 4 years probably, depending on how many pies I eat. So we'll come back and we'll show you what this looks like as it's blooming through the season. If you guys haven't been on my Instagram page, there's a link down in the description. I post pictures here and there of what's going on in the garden, aside from what I do here on YouTube. So I hope you guys like this one. I hope you learned something from it. If you did, hit the like button. If you have any comments about anything I did out here or want to know something I just didn't cover, please let me know down below, and you guys know I will answer it. 97% chance. Some of them slip through the cracks. Anyway, thank you guys for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoy your week, and I'll see you in the next video. Adios.